Hello everyone, welcome to the June edition of JMC Live. This month will be a little different because we're going to do a review of my actual first sermon that was written, and I have a copy of it still. This is the original notebook that I had in high school. Now, God gave me a message when I was still in high school, and I went and spoke with my pastor at the time at Huntington First Baptist Church in Huntington, Texas, Brother Daryl Smith. And there was going to be a revival service that summer, and then over that time, I started writing, working through the sermon, coming up with ideas, and eventually did this sermon, and I wrote the date. The date was the 14th of December in the year 1997. Now, if you look at society as a whole today, with all the cultural changes and all the different things that have happened from 1997 to today, now mind you, this sermon in my hands, in the Bible that I used, was written in public school. It was written on the bus. It was written before church and at home. I wasn't told I couldn't bring a Bible. I wasn't told I couldn't write this. In fact, in high school, I took a elective class for Bible literature. And I was awarded something called the H Award for the best student, the best grade, not just the best grades, but the best overall achievement for that year. So that's what we're going to cover tonight. The two songs that will be played are You Won't Relent and Here I Am to Worship. All right, just a moment. We're trying to find out.
No, we're not going to be able to do it. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, so the video's not going to play?
We've got the video. Don't know what's going on. Audio is not working on it. Have no idea. So
that's very odd. All right, so we have two songs that will be available for free download. I'm not sure why
they're already available.
They're already available because we were going to do this show last week, and things happened where we couldn't do it last week. In fact, I almost thought I was going to do it tonight because now I'm the one that's sick. So they'll be on the Reverb Nation page. They're free downloads. I don't know why those videos don't want to play. They played earlier. But, through the wonderful power of technical difficulties and whatnot, like I said, we have all this completely made before this starts. So, we are always ahead one step. So, if something happens to a video or something like that, we'll already have the videos done separately. We'll load that as a separate video of the two songs once we can get it corrected. In fact, we might have to re-record the video.
No, the audio, we can just upload the audio with images.
Yeah, we can just do that.
Too.
We'll just upload audio.
Let's just move on.
With some images of a separate video later. So as I was saying, and this is going to be a two-hand story of me actually sharing my first sermon, but I also want to make it a cultural thing for today here in America, because here it is, right here. And you can see this date. Well, I mean, it's kind of crinkled. 12/14/1997, and yeah, it's written in blue and green ink because back then I wrote in different colors of pen. I felt like my sermon title was written in like black ink, and there was different pieces in it that I wrote that was like in blue ink, and then the rest of the sermon itself was written in green ink. The reason why I chose green is I thought green was symbolic of God creating the earth, and my subject was faith. And I talk about what is it and how it works. Now, before we get into the sermon, what I want to discuss real quick with you is how many 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds ever written a sermon? How many people have you ever met that is 16 and 17 years old that wrote a sermon? Not many people write sermons until they go to seminary and they learn how to do it. This was 1997. I wrote my first sermon. I've written many since then, but there's a purpose, the reason why I chose to discuss this one, because look at where America is headed. Look at what has happened before I was ever born. with prayer being taken out of school. Look what's happening to different churches in America and abroad, where things in society have gotten to this point where we're so relevant and we're so culturally sensitive to the things that are going on, we are not sticking to the foundational truths of Christianity and the foundations of what Jesus Christ has done, what the Bible has told us. And the purpose of me sharing this story, this sermon, is I'm hoping someone else in that age group is inspired by God through the Holy Spirit to want to write a sermon and do what I did and go ask your pastor, hey, pastor, can I share a sermon on a, like in the case of this is almost coming up on Christmas season. The pastor was working on stuff for an event. He needed a Sunday evening off so he could prepare for some stuff, and I was that person for that time. So what I'm doing with this season, with this version of it, I'm tying, if you've seen any videos in my room, I'm a really big Marvel Comics fan. So we're going to combine the Avengers with faith and other comic heroes throughout this whole series so we can reach younger people with this message. Because I was 17 years of age. I was 17 already at that point. I started writing this when I was 16. Because I contacted the pastor in June of 1997, and my birthday's August 4th. So, as you see, faith, what is it, how it works? What we start with is a definition of what faith is. And the dictionary I use, the 97 version, says a belief in the value or truth and worthiness of someone or something, a belief and trust in God. The Bible defines faith as justification, and sanctification, power, trial, and grace through joy and peace commended to serving God. Now, I look at this, and we can go to the next slide on this. If any of you seen the new Spider-Man movie that was recently put out on DVD, where there's the multiple Spider-Men in the universe. This is Morales, just as he's jumped off the skyscraper, because the team of other Spider-Men told him he wasn't ready to be the next Spider-Man. And they told him, well, all you need is a leap of faith. So he took, because he couldn't figure out how to use his powers yet. And if you look at the foundations of what faith means, this is a worldly example of a godly thing that can happen in someone's life. Now, I'm not telling somebody to jump off a building. I'm using this as an example to reach younger people. And the point of this message is quite simply, there are times in your life when you have to make decisions where you don't have all the answers. And you're supposed to be the one to solve the problem, but you don't always do it because you need that extra step to start working out your skills. And that was what I wrote in my sermon here. It says, we can go to the next slide. If we as Christians can look towards faith during any situation, it'd be great. It'd be wonderful. We'd be able to do so many things. But when trials and so many different things come in our life, so many bad things happen, we have to assemble. Just like you see here, the Avengers assembled. They came together. They weren't able to do something on their own. They had to work together to figure this out. So if you look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11 through 13, we're talking about the full armor of God. And if anyone's watched the new Avengers movie, they all get new armor. And in the next slide, you'll see a picture of that armor. And the foundation of anything that involves putting on the full armor of God, it involves prayer. Now, prayer is a two-edged sword. I can pray to God, but to be an effective Christian, you should pray with one another. It shouldn't be this, okay, I'm going to pray for you all the time. If that's the only communication that you're doing, and you're not actually, doing this prayer thing together, you're missing out on the bigger picture. It says, put on the whole armor of God that you'll be able to stand against the wills of the devil. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and powers, against rulers of the darkness of the world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. It says, wherever, take on the whole armor so you'll be able to withstand that day, having to stand. And the verse continues to go on and on and on about what you're supposed to do with this. Now, when you're trying to do these different things in your life, you can't sit here and survive without having these different things in your life. You see behind me, and this is also hand in hand, I ended up getting a devotional book. So when you're trying to put on the full armor of God, you need to be able to read the Bible. You need to be able to read studies of what different people have said. This was the book that I had in high school. This was 1998, 97 that I wrote this stuff. And there's comments in here every day. Comments on when I got sick in high school. When I missed over a whole month of stuff. Comments in here about different things. And now here it is, fast forward all these years later. What does this have to do with what I'm talking about? Well, as you see this slide here, it's a combination of where your mindset goes. If you're wanting peace, you have to have prayer. You have to be filled with the Spirit. If you're wanting to have patience in a situation, God has to fill you for that. If you want to understand what to do, you have to have wisdom. And if you don't have wisdom, you can't love. And if you love somebody, then you'll be able to show mercy. And I put them in that order. Because without peace is a foundation, you can't get to patience. You can't get wisdom. You can't get love. And you can't get mercy. You just can't do it. It's not possible. Now, when you ask for these things, it doesn't always happen. Does it? No. You run into places where you can't understand what's happening in your life. And you can't move forward. And you're like, God, help me. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to give you a story. Let's go on the next slide. This is an example that God gave me when I first wrote this sermon. Family's on a vacation trip in the mountains. And that little speck you see in that little corner on the edge is a kid who has wandered off. He is alone, away from his parents and his friends. And he sees a flower, something sparkly on the edge. And he keeps walking closer to the edge. And he falls. Now, as you see almost at the end of that cliff, there's a little root hanging out. And he ends up grabbing this root. And he's holding on for this dear life. And as he falls, he screams, "Ah!" You know, and everybody hears it because he's screaming with this high-pitched voice because he's a kid. So they knew exactly where he ran to. So his family's looking down. And he's a little bit further from it. And the only thing, the father was like busy doing his own thing. He was busy, thinking about, the latest Avengers movie, the baseball game. He was talking about that with his friends. Mom was over here, thinking about all this stuff. She was messing around in her phone, not paying attention to her kid. Neither one of them were paying attention to what the kid was doing, and he falls off the cliff. Now they're in a situation. What do? Kid's falling off the cliff. And he just not paying attention to anything. Now here's the situation where faith had to come in play. And you can think about that scene from that Spider-Man movie. The father says, you have to let go of that branch. You have to let go of this branch. And I'm going to grab your hand. But you have to trust me. You have to have faith in me that I will catch you before you fall any further. And the kid pleads, Dad, no, I can't do it. I can't let go of the branch. You got to climb down here. And excuse after excuse. And he's starting to get weak. Starting to shake. And anyone's prior military, you had to stand there and hold your rifle, which is about 9.5 pounds straight like this. And you see my arm, after about a minute, you start doing this. And then after a while, you start doing this. And if you hold it long enough, you will dislocate your shoulder. And that's what was happening to this kid. He couldn't do it anymore. He said, okay, Dad, I trust you. And he lets go of his hand. And then the next thing you know, what happens? He lets go of his hand and he grabs him real hard. His fingernails are digging in his son's arm and pulls him back up. There's going to be a point in your life where you got to let go of that root. And let the Father, Jesus Christ, grab you out of that mess that you're in. Maybe you're the father or the mother right now who's too busy in the world and you're not listening to Jesus Christ, and your son or daughter has run off the cliff. Guess what that son and daughter symbolizes? That symbolizes your soul falling off the cliff into the pit of sin. The sins in your life. Let's go on the next slide. Here's another, this is a quote from the sermon, so I've kind of shortened it down. It says, the path for us is always small, but for us to travel, it means giving up that time spent for other things that go before God. Not going to church, not spending time in His Word. When we feel like nothing works, even going to church, remember that if we believe, don't just sit there and worry about things. Quit worrying. Quit letting sin carry you. Carrying the sin to the foot of the cross of God. We are doing these things too much on our own. This road that we travel is not our road. It's a road God has put before us, or the road that we put before us, or the road that the devil put before us. Which road are you taking? Or are you like some people? You just sitting on the road. I'm just sitting here, man. Give you another example. There was a family in Hurricane Katrina that was on their roof, and they were asking for help, and boats came past. They said, oh, I'm waiting to be rescued. Other boats come past, they're waiting to be rescued. These are just regular people. Then when they're actually in the water, because the water got above the roof, they're in the water now. Now here comes the Coast Guard to save these people. And all the other people were volunteers. Some of them were plainclothes law enforcement and Coast Guard and firemen, and they refuse. Sometimes we get in that situation where we just don't focus on what needs to be done, and we're not doing the things that should be done. Let's go to the next slide. See, just as Morales here had to jump off a building at the end of the Spider-Man film to actually start his powers to work, which is what happens. He finally is able to jump off the roof, and he's able to get the spider's webbing to work, and he's able to activate his abilities because he couldn't go invisible. He couldn't do anything yet. He was able to do the things that he was supposed to. But here's another thing you got to look at. At the same point that things happen in your life, where do things go? And we got to go to John chapter 5 for that. As you can see in the screenshot. John chapter 5 verses 3 and 8. I'm going to scroll over so I can read what I have up there too. So, if you get to John chapter 5 verses 3 through 8. It says, And these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, a blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at the season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole in whatsoever disease had. And a certain man was there, and he had an infirmity for 38 years. See, sometimes God wants men and women to rise, but in some cases, there's a case of some kind of infirmity, something that has happened to you that happens to hold you back. And when Jesus saw him, verse 6, lie, he knew that when he had been there a long time, he said, What has made, wilt thou be made whole? Jesus says. The impotent man answers, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steps before me. Jesus said, Rise, take up your bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked on the same day that was the Sabbath. There are times in your life when you are not feeling good. Like, I don't feel good. I could have canceled this. You have to get up and keep going. Like my wife with Crohn's disease. There are times that you have to do things when you don't feel like it. Being a Christian is not a feeling. And that is the biggest mistake that American culture has done. That has turned the church into a psychological exam. It's more about what you feel versus then what the Holy Spirit instructs you to do. Because there's two different ways this works. It is not always about what you think and what you feel. It's about the instruction from God. And somebody recently says, oh, the Holy Spirit doesn't let you, do things as you don't want to. Then why did Jonah have to go in a whale? How many times did he complain about that? Why did he go to Nineveh? Because he didn't want to do it. Just like I've known since high school, I could have moved to Ohio. But I didn't do it yet. I gave an excuse. We all have an excuse at some point. On something. Something that has happened. Something that has occurred. Like my fear of going to college. You know how many times I enrolled for college before I actually did it? 10 different times. 10 different universities. Over 10 years. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that you need to do? How do you move to your next point? We're going to do that. We're going to go to the next slide. And we're going to go to the book of Acts. Acts chapter 16. This might take you a while. You got to go back to get to Acts chapter 16. And I'll give you a moment on that. Give me just a few moments to get to Acts chapter 16. It's going to be verses 16 through 40, so this is going to take a bit. And you're seeing this scene on the screen. This is where the shackles are coming down. We're going to talk about that. Verse 16, Acts chapter 16, verse 16. And it came to pass as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with the spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. The same followed Paul and us and cried, saying, these men are the servants of the Most High God, which show the way to salvation. And this did she many days. But Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out of her the same hour. When her master saw that the hope of their gains was gone, they caught Paul and Silas and drew them to the marketplace unto the rulers, and brought them to the magistrates, saying, these men, being Jews, do exceedingly trouble our city, each customs which are not lawful for us to receive, neither to observe, being Romans. And the multitude rose up together against them, and the magistrates rent off their clothes and commanded them to beat them. So at this point, they're talking about wanting to beat them. In verses 23 through 26, you're going to see the shackles fall off. It says, when they laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safe. Having received such charge, thrust them in the inner prison and made their feet fast in the stocks. So they're locked in and can't even go anywhere. At midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. So here they are in chains, in a prison, physically locked in place. Not just in prison, they're locked in place. And they're praising God. Thank you for this opportunity. We're going to be able to set some souls free in the prison. You got an opportunity to share the gospel. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors are open and everyone's bands are loosened. So not only was Paul set free, Jesus, God allowed this earthquake to occur. So then all these shackles came off. And some videos that show that they don't just immediately run away. They go and start ministering to the jailers and to the other prisoners about, I told you my God is real. I told you this was going to happen. Are you listening now? You know? That is what God can do in your life. But you have to have the foundations of faith to be able to do that. Not hope, not gifts, not works. You know, that comes after you have this first. Because without the faith, you will give up too many times. Or in the case of me, trying to, go to college, or, meeting Bethany Williamson and talking to Sean Williamson, who worked at AEP in 1997. I remember that day. And within a month after talking to Bethany, and we were writing letters back and forth, Sean was coming home, and she said he worked at AEP in the database department, and I clearly remember she handing the phone to Sean and me talking about college and Ohio State and about career and what life is like. And then that conversation hits me again while in the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard has a relationship with AEP. See, sometimes things happen in your life that you don't understand, and you don't know how long it's going to take. And without faith, you will give up and completely quit. So I'm going to have to leave you with this. And we can go to the last slide. If God can set free Paul and Silas, if God can heal someone, take over your bed, rise and walk. If parents can pay better attention to their children and what they're doing and how they're functioning, so their children don't run away. If children can pay attention to their parents and put God first, you will be able to let God lead you no matter wherever the roads of your life will lead you. And no matter how long something takes, things can happen. Use my example if you need an example, because you don't see one. How many times did I apply for college? Over 10. How many years? Over 12 years. Sometimes it takes determination to do something. But you have to have faith in an idea for something in your life to occur. If you're talking about the spiritual side of life, you have to be able to put forth the work that God has given you. And that's to learn who He is. What is He about? What does Jesus want to do through you today? And you will have different seasons in your life. I remember when I was at Teen Mania, I went from being the guy who took out the trash in Ron's loose office to taking out the trash and cleaning all the chairs in the auditorium. Then I went and cleaned the summer camps. Then I cleaned our dorms. Then I was asked to be on the intercessory prayer teams. Then I was asked to go and do outreach missions in Tyler, Texas, and help other ministries with their music. Then I was asked to go and speak somewhere else. There's different seasons in your life on different things. Just like now. We at one point when I was in school, we were doing this show every day. Now it's a once a month program. Different seasons. Different times for different things. On my primary work, I'm able to minister in a different way in my job, about how I present myself, versus what I can do on this show. And then when we're done with the show, Miranda's still making hats and scarves. We're still giving out all the music that we record. In fact, we're recording more music with less shows than we were doing when we were doing more shows. So imagine that. God will never give you something you cannot accomplish. But as I said, for those of you that are younger, think about the Avengers. Did they do everything by themselves? No. You need other people to help you. And God will get you to where you need to be. Faith is that foundation. Do you know what your faith is today? if you were put in that position where you were put in prison, or you're put on trial, or you're put in a corner to give up. The other example is the 99 weeks I was out of work. I kept applying for jobs, and I applied for 1,000 jobs in over 99 weeks. I was called a liar. Well, what happened after I lost my job? Between the McGraw-Hill job and the PNC Bank job, in 9 months I applied for 1,000 jobs, and I posted it every week. I posted how many jobs I applied for on Facebook. And all the people that were on my Facebook who called me a liar before, they still to this day have not said one word and have not made one comment. Nor have they apologized. They're just shell-shocked. If God has something for you to do, you'll accomplish it. God will lead you in places that only you can help somebody else. So I'll leave that with you today. The final thoughts. The last words in the sermon. Let me get to the last page. Here's the last thing that I wrote back in 1997. I'm going to read the last paragraph. So with faith, you can do just about anything you want. Just ask God for guidance, and whatever you're doing, He will lead you through whatever He has in store for your future. I wrote that in 1997. What has God given you that you'll be able to read in the future, and everything will start coming back together in place and make sense? God bless you, and we'll have our next show that will be scheduled for July 15th at 8 p.m. God bless.